Right, so my name is Gergo. I work at Speckle as a software engineer. I'm mostly working on the DevOps and backend development side regarding the server. And in this 1 hour webinar session, we are going to take a look at how you can deploy Speckle servers on your own, why you should, why you shouldn't. And by the end of this hour, we are going to have 2 Speckle servers running, hopefully. Right, so let's go through the agenda again. Here, I'm guessing that you already know what Speckle is, and you are here to learn a bit more about deployments. If that's not the case, please let me know. But I'm not going to go into details on what Speckle does as a product. So we are going to focus on the server and the deployments there, and we're gonna take a look at the components to understand a bit more how many components build up the server, um, discuss some whys about why you would want to deploy a Speckle server yourself. Gonna get up and running as quick as possible with the DigitalOcean one-click image to see how easy it is to get going with your own deployment. And then we are going to get a bit into the nitty-gritty with customizing a Docker Compose deployment. And we are going to discuss a few upgrade strategies for these deployments, and some more robust deployment options will also be mentioned at the end of the talk. And I would like to keep this talk quite laid back. So if you have questions or something is not very clear, please ask your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. And at the end of the session, I will try to answer them if they are not regarding the actual topic, right? So, but if anything is unclear and I should reiterate, I will answer those quickly. Right, so let's get started. What is Speckle Web and the other components? So there's a Speckle Web project that is what we also call the server. And this is responsible for having a front-end view for the for your server, and also for storing your data and allowing you to communicate between all of your connectors, right? So it's basically currently the default central hub for your data communications. All the connectors are connected to via the server, and that's why it's very important to have. The other components, I'm not going to go into details. What builds up the Speckle web is a few microservices and a front end, and we are going to take a look at how this is architected. Right, and the reason why this is important is that as we move and evolve the Speckle web component, we are adding and upgrading all of these services quite in a rapid pace. So keeping up with the development and deploying new versions, it's good to know how stuff operates, right? So we're going to have an ingress that is responsible for routing traffic between all of the components. It routes the front-end traffic towards the Speckle front-end, and then all of the backend stuff is routed to the server. We do have a Postgres database for storing our data, and a Redis cache, mostly used for notifications and pops up stuff. All of the preview service, webhook service, and the newly added file import service that you cannot see here. We'll also talk to the Postgres database, right? And as you see in this chart, I intentionally left out the file import service because that's was added like a few weeks ago, and yeah, it shows the rapid pace of how we are adding new components. Why is that important? Mm, is that you should always keep up with the new components as well. Okay, so why you would want to deploy a Speckle server yourself? We know that there's a need to keep control of your data, right? So there's when there is um, strict data residency needs, you can control where your data lives, since you are the one who is managing the actual database and all of the infrastructure, right? So that's why that's one reason that you can take control of it. We did hear of completely air-gapped deployments when the Speckle server is completely like not connected to any other server, so it's a very secure way of managing your project data, right? And also, if you have custom additions to your server, or you have custom needs, or you just want to try some new stuff, you can also run your own version of the Speckle server. Of course, these options are also all an extension of what we already offer as a free service in speckle.xyz, but you can run your own. Okay, so some issues or pitfalls that you should keep in mind when deploying a Speckle server, and these are just up here to have some knowledge on what you shouldn't do. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. Guys, can you see the screen share? Because I'm having some pings that it's down. Okay, so let me try to move to a new slide, maybe hop in. You should see deployment strategies now. I do see some reports from people seeing black screens, so maybe try refreshing your screen or your Hopin session, and that should probably fix it. And I'm going to try to restart the screen share, so maybe that should be better. Okay, so it seems that me resharing my camera and screen fixed it, hopefully. Okay, so let's get back to some of the issues that you can face when deploying your own server, right? And we are mentioning these basically because what we are going to demo is a guide how you can avoid these issues. Right, so as I mentioned, we are moving at a rapid pace, and keeping up with the new components is really important because we are delivering features and fixes like on a bi-weekly basis usually. And if you are not able to easily upgrade your deployment, that means that you are lagging behind. And as we are pushing out new updates to the connectors, you should really keep in sync with the server as well. Um, if you are deploying your own NGINX configuration, that could be an issue because when you are uploading big files, that could get blocked, but our configuration works around this. One very important thing is if you don't have a domain name and TLS setup for your server, that means that you are sending your data to the Speckle server unencrypted. And yeah, so basically anyone in the middle can read your data that you are sending. If you are not deploying all of the components, that means that some functionalities might not be working for you. You should keep in mind to have all of the microservices running. Okay, but these are just some of the stuff that you should keep in mind about the deployment strategies. We do offer a DigitalOcean one-click image that is the quickest and easiest way to get a quick Speckle server up and running, but it's not the most production ready. We do have a Docker containers / Docker Compose based deployment, which we are also going to see today. And we have some help on how you get stuff up and running in Kubernetes. We are now releasing a very work in progress version of a Helm chart that installs all of the components into a Kubernetes cluster, and you can check that out in the link below. Also, we do offer managed deployments, but this session is not about that. This session is about how you can deploy your own. Right, so let's go to the demo, right? So let's get started with a one-click image. And for this, as well, it was mentioned in the prerequisites, we are going to use a DigitalOcean account. It's my personal account, so there's no actual Speckle stuff set up. I did create some details in my own account beforehand so that we don't need to waste some time on that. But to get started with a DigitalOcean one-click image, once you sign up for a DO account, what you also should have is a domain that is registered for you, and it is managed by DigitalOcean, right? So in the networking tab, you should have your domain added that you can manage via DigitalOcean. All the DO tutorials are really helpful on this, so I would suggest that you check those out if you don't know the details. But to get back to the actual one-click deployment, we are going to create a new droplet, which is the DigitalOcean equivalent of a virtual machine, which we will use the one-click deployment on. So get into droplets, and we are going to create a new droplet. And so once you are in here, DigitalOcean has a marketplace into which we are publishing our one-click deployment script. And once the marketplace loads, you can just search for Speckle. easy, and there's only one Speckle related one-click image in DO. And you click that. We already suggest some requirements here, so you cannot under provision your server. And you select the type of droplet that you want. You can select your data center that you want to run in. I'm closest to Frankfurt, so that's what I'm going to select. And for me to be able to to log into the server, I'm going to use an SSH key, which I already pre-registered for my machine, but you can also use a root password that you can use to log in to set up the actual one-click deployment. So these are all details that you have to check. And once you are done with that, then we can go ahead and create the droplet. And once that's done, we do need to wait for DigitalOcean to create this virtual machine. And while we are waiting for that, you guys can, if there was something that was not clear how I described so far, please let me know. Or if you have some quick questions, I can answer those. If not, the next steps, what we are going to take is set up the domain that should point to this virtual machine. And then we are going to connect to that and run the pre-configured setup script that comes with the one-click application. And that should help us, that should guide us to get a functional Speckle server up and running, right? So while this is still booting up, I'm going to go into the networking tab, register the domain in the domains, and I'm going to create a Speckle dash webinar dash one click dot my name.com as the domain. And I'm going to route all traffic for this domain into the newly created virtual machine and create a record for that. Okay, so that was easy. And in this time, the droplet should be up and running. And to test that, we can actually run a quick ping command to see that my domain name setup was successful. Right, since we are getting ping responses for the domain name, I'm going to check that the IP address that is up here is the one that we have for the droplet, which is true. So that's good. It means that we should be up and running. And one last thing is left, that we need to connect to that droplet to run the setup script. So I'm going to SSH into that with the root user, into that machine with the root user. And since I've already set up my SSH key, I am allowed to connect to this machine, right? If you are using a root password, then you should use that method to connect. But once you are successfully connected, you are greeted with this screen that we set up for you that should guide you through the setup of the one-click image, right? And I'm going to paste in the URL. We are not going to enable emails just yet because we are just to get a quick server up and running. We do need to register for Let's Encrypt to have a valid email and get notifications if our certificate is about to expire. And right now, our certificate is also deployed and our server is also deployed. So if we go into this URL, we should see a new Speckle server up and running. There you go. So this was easy. We can register to this with a new user. And oops, my passwords don't match. And now we have a completely new, completely custom Speckle server up and running with the one-click image. Right. Is the screen frozen again? It's fine now. Okay. So we have this. You can go ahead and use this as your Speckle server. What this doesn't give you is this is sort of a not that robust deployment. So all of the databases and the Redis instance is running on only this virtual machine. You don't get backups for your data, etc., etc. Right. To be able to be a bit more flexible in your deployment, let's take a look at the next option, which would be creating a server with Docker Compose. And to get that done, we are going to create a new droplet that we will also use a one-click image from DigitalOcean, but this would be a much more bare bones one-click image. This is only there to get you set up with Docker and Docker Compose, right? And this is suggested for you, so you should choose Docker here. And I'm going to choose the same droplet specification as it was for the previous one, because having 4 gigs of RAM is sort of the minimum that you should have for a Speckle server deployment. That's why the one-click image suggests to do so. Gonna go with Frankfurt again, and I'm gonna add my SSH key there as well. Okay, so while this droplet is being created, I'm gonna register a new domain that will be used for the Speckle web, and this would be Compose, so that we don't mix up. I'm gonna route all of the traffic from this URL to the new droplet that is not created yet, but the IP is pre-allocated. And once that boots up, which is done now, I'm gonna go and do a ping check and connect to that. There you go, we have a response. And now we are going to SSH into that. Same with the root user. Oops. Okay, so this machine is bare bones. We don't have anything Speckle related set up. It's going to be our job to get things running. And I'm going to enlarge my font because I think that you guys cannot properly see it, but there will be some text on this screen. Okay, so to get started with a Docker Compose based deployment, we are going to need a Docker Compose file, right? So I'm going to create a new Docker Compose.yaml, and we are going to go into edit that. And to get started with this, we do have a guide on how you set up a Docker Compose based deployment up on speckle.guide, which will guide you through on how these steps should be taken, right? So speckle.guide/dev and slash the server and API part. Here we have a deploying a server with the manual setup. And in here, we do have an example Docker Compose file that already includes a basic but working configuration for getting up and running. I'm going to take all of this and copy paste uh, into the file that we are editing on the server. And I'm going to go back on the top. So in here, we have some services specified. We do have a Postgres instance, we do have a Redis instance, and a Minio service, which will be used for uploading files with the file uploads. And we have the Speckle related services down here with all of their respective configuration values. And to show you guys that this is quite easy to get up and running is I'm gonna leave most of the values as it is for now and get the server running. But before that, before we save and start the server, I'm going to add some more details regarding the SSL configuration. To do that, you can also go to the Speckle guides, and down here we have some more details on how you automatically can add a reverse proxy service, which will take care of creating a SSL cert for you. This means we need to add one more extra service into our Compose specification, which will be this traffic service. And in here, we do need to change some values that are not, that we cannot provide as a sensible default because we don't know your email address, right? So we do need to replace these values, right? I'm going to use my own email here. And this will be used by Let's Encrypt to register the certificate for this domain name. That's all for the reverse proxy. And one more thing that we need to add is that we need to configure the front-end service so that it's matching some labels. But for those, we also going to have to just copy paste some data from our guide. Here you go. These are the labels that you need to add to the front-end service. And what these labels enables the reverse proxy is to properly route traffic to this front end. And for that to happen, we do need to replace this host value with the actual host that we are going to use here. So this is going to be Speckle web compose .com. And these are all the basic changes that you need to add to the compose file. If it was a bit too much to digest, don't worry. We try to explain it step by step in our guide site, so you can follow that. All right, but with this setup, we can get started and have our server running with Docker Compose up. And the name of the file is implied, but it's going to take this docker compose.yaml that we just created, and it should start up some containers and some services. Okay, I did mistype my file. So there's possibly one ending. This one is not properly indented. And I possibly misindented the labels as well. God, I love YAML. Okay, now all the issues are fixed. It was I misindented some labels and some services, but now Docker goes out and pulls all the images that we have specified. So you can see that we are pulling the Postgres and Redis images and creating all the necessary components for the server to function. Just a fun fact here is the one-click image does almost exactly the same in the background, but all of these details and the configuration management part is abstracted away from you with the one-click image setup script that we are providing. Okay, so now we are going to, now these services are going to be created. And it says that the server is up and running, and If everything goes well, we already have a valid certificate set up. So let's try to connect to Speckle -web -compose. All right. And we have the server up and running, and we can register for this. And if oops, suppose that not everything is up yet. Okay, so I already registered. And I managed to work myself into one of the common pitfalls that was listed before, is that I just realized that I forgot to update the uh, canonical URL for the backend service, right? So we are not, the front end is served and we are up and running with that, but we are not allowed to route traffic to the backend. So we do need to update some configurations here for the server. And what I managed to update here is to properly add the canonical URL. And we are going to use this Speckle -web -post. And if we restart the services, it should be fixed. And once we are up and running, we should be able to connect and log in to the server. Let's see. There you go. It is fixed, and we are issued with a valid certificate for the site that is auto-renewed, that is taken care of by the reverse proxy and certbot in the backend. So now you have a Speckle server up and running with Docker Compose. Okay, so these were the two basic demos that I prepared, and for next steps, I do have some customization examples for the Docker Compose to show you guys why you should use Compose if you want to further customize your deployment. But I'm going to pause here for a second and wait for some questions, maybe if I should reiterate something. All right, if you guys don't have questions, my next step in this demo would be to make our deployment a bit more fault tolerant / robust, is to exchange the PostgreSQL database, and basically instead of running the database on the same droplet, I'm going to go and use a DigitalOcean managed database instead of the one that we just provided. So to get started with that, I am going to go up and remove the Postgres service from here. And I'm going to go ahead and reconfigure all the backend services so that it would point to a DigitalOcean managed database. In order to do that, we do need to modify the Docker Compose file, and we do need to modify the Postgres URL / the wait hosts for all the backend services that rely on a Postgres database, right? And before we can add the details of the database connection strings, I do need to register a new database, for which I already have a database cluster set up on DigitalOcean, but I'm going to create a new database inside that cluster so that it's completely unique for this deployment. So I'm going to add a new web compose database, and I'm going to add a new user. Right, so that is set up, and to get started with this, we do need to add some more details on the backend side. And don't worry, this database cluster will be destroyed once the webinar is done. So you won't, even if you see my connection strings, it would be long gone for you guys to access this. So first things first, we do need to use this Postgres URL, Postgres connection string, to use with the backend services, right? So we need to replace these with that one. And we do need to do this for all the currently 4 backend services that rely on a Postgres DB. Okay, and we are going to need to add one more thing, is that if you check the end of the connection string, this PostgreSQL instance requires you to use SSL. And for us to be able to connect to that, we do need a CA certificate that is issued by the DO Postgres cluster. So we will need to provide that certificate for all the services. And in order to do that, we are going to create a new file and mount that into the containers. Right. So we are going to create a volume mount. And we are going to use a new folders for pgcert, and we're gonna mount that to /pgcert. I hope that I'm writing this the way. And what we need to go do is download this certificate, take take the data from it and save it into a new file. First, let's recreate our services so that the, oops, it's volumes, not just volume, but it's plural. And things are not going to work now because we don't have a valid certificate here, but that is fine since that's what we are working on. And now you see that there's a new PG certificate folder created here, which will be the base of this mount that we are adding to the containers. So I'm going to go into that folder and create a new file called ca-cert.crt and paste all the content of the certificate here and save, and that should be enough data for the certificate to work. And we now need to go back and edit the post file with one more extra environment variable that is called node extra certs, if I'm not mistaken. And in here, we do need to provide a value where the certificate can be found. So this should be, so this is the source where we are coming from, and this is the target of the mount. So we are gonna do /pg -cert /ca cert.crt. And we do need to take this value and add it to all of the services that were missing these. And if I did not mistype the name of the environment variable, we should be good to go. Okay, it seems that there are still errors on that. So let me try to look up the actual value of the of the environment variable. Sorry, just 1 second. Oh, right. Okay, so it's node extra TA certs, and I forgot to add the extra. Hopefully fixed now. And if we restart our services, I really hope that we will have a proper valid self-signed in chain. Oh, shoot. So the server started up properly. But the other services did not. Is possible that I did not add the volume mounts to the other services. Oh yeah, there you go. Oh, the other services are missing the volume mounts. So let's copy that and paste them over to everywhere which needs it. And since the backend started up, the server started up properly, I really hope that this was the last step that we needed to take. Okay, looking good. And if we go back to the deployment that we had previously, what should happen is that our login should be invalid. And if I were to try to log in now, my previous user should be gone because we are connecting to a different database. And that is true since we don't have, it says that we have invalid credentials. So now we can re-register for this server. And means that all of our data is now stored into the managed database that we registered, and then we can use that to have backups / redundancy / whatever fits your needs. Okay, so basically this concludes the demo. We did manage to successfully stand up 2 Speckle servers in 1 hour with some customizations. And now I would love to hear your questions / feedback / your opinions on how things look now. Okay, so while those are arriving, I'm going to point you towards 2 more resources. One is our Speckle docs. Speckle.guide is where you will find all of the details about the guides on Speckle, and speckle.guide/dev is where our developer flow focused documentations are. And here you will find all the steps that I've just shown you. So in here, we do have a page dedicated to deploying a DigitalOcean marketplace app, which guides you through all the steps that I've just did. And also we have deploying a server manual setup guide um, that will be a good resource for you to get a nice starting template for a Docker Compose file and some more details regarding these TLS certificates. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we do have some more stuff coming down the line. So resources for getting started, yep. And I do want to plug one more thing is our Helm chart. Is we are deploying a new Helm chart that you can use to deploy Speckle into a Kubernetes cluster. Keep in mind that this is still work in progress, but we do recommend for any company that has a dedicated IT team to use a Helm-based deployment, because this way all the new changes and all the new services and their configuration values are automatically scaffolded um, with the templating that we are maintaining. So you get all the updates the quickest and the easiest. So that was all from me. And one closing thought is, please make sure you star our GitHub repo, because it does help and we do really appreciate it. And also one more thing is that I'm really sorry for what Hopin gave us today. I hope that at least some takeaways, you could take away some thoughts from this session, and my guide was helpful for you to get started with deploying Speckle for your own. Guys, I don't really see many questions popping. So if you don't have questions, then I think that we are sort of on the clock. And thank you everyone for joining in. Again, very sorry for the technical difficulties, but yeah, see you around, and make sure to join our community forum, and also you can ask your questions there. Thank you for listening. Bye.